Maria Santos never imagined that her small salon chair on forward operating base Thunder would become the center of one of the most incredible rescue operations in modern military history. At 28 years old, she had spent the last 3 years cutting hair for soldiers, Marines, and Special Forces operatives in the remote mountains of Afghanistan. To everyone around her, she was simply the friendly hairdresser who knew exactly how to give a perfect military cut and always had a warm smile ready for the battle-weary troops. What nobody knew was that Maria Santos wasn't just any hairdresser. Hidden beneath her civilian contractor identity lay a past that would soon prove invaluable to saving American lives. Born in El Salvador during the height of the Civil War, Maria had experienced violence and chaos from a very young age. Her father, Captain Roberto Santos, served in the Salvadoran military, and her mother worked as a nurse in field hospitals. When Maria was just 15, her family was forced to flee their homeland after her father uncovered corruption within his own ranks. Death threats followed them across borders, and they eventually found refuge in the United States. Growing up in East Los Angeles, Maria learned to blend in, to observe without being noticed, and most importantly, to survive. She spoke 4 languages fluently and had an almost supernatural ability to read people's emotions and intentions. These skills, combined with her father's military training that he secretly passed on to her, made Maria far more than she appeared to be. After high school, Maria enlisted in the Army and underwent specialized training in intelligence gathering and reconnaissance. She served 2 tours in Iraq, working undercover in various civilian roles while collecting critical information about enemy movements and activities. Her cover as a hairdresser had proven perfect during her second deployment, as soldiers would relax and talk freely while getting their hair cut, often revealing valuable intelligence without realizing it. When her military service ended, Maria thought she was done with dangerous missions. She took a civilian contractor position as a hairdresser on FOB Thunder, believing it would be a peaceful way to continue serving the troops while staying away from combat operations. The base was considered relatively safe, nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains and protected by multiple layers of security. For 3 years, Maria's small salon became a sanctuary for soldiers. She would arrive each morning at 0800 hours, set up her equipment, and spend the day making the troops look and feel a little more human. Her gentle hands and patient ear provided comfort to men and women who had seen too much violence and death. She knew their stories, their fears, and their hopes for returning home safely. Lieutenant Colonel James Morrison, the base commander, often joked that Maria's salon was worth more for morale than all the recreational facilities combined. Soldiers would wait in line for hours just to spend 20 minutes in her chair, not just for the haircut, but for the sense of normalcy she provided in an otherwise harsh and unpredictable environment. Among her regular clients was a special operations team led by Master Chief Petty Officer David Hawk Henderson. The SEAL team had been stationed at FOB Thunder for 2 months, conducting high-value target missions in the surrounding mountains. Hawk and his men were different from the regular troops. They carried themselves with a quiet intensity, spoke in hushed tones, and always seemed to be planning their next operation. Maria had developed a particular fondness for the SEAL team. Despite their dangerous profession, they treated her with respect and genuine appreciation. Hawk, a 15-year veteran with steel-gray eyes and numerous scars, had become almost like a protective older brother to her. He would often stay after his haircut just to chat about normal things: baseball, movies, food, anything that didn't involve war or combat. The team's communications specialist, Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Tech Rodriguez, was close to Maria's age and shared her Latino heritage. They would sometimes speak in Spanish, sharing stories about their families and their hopes for the future. Tech had a wife and 2 young children back in San Diego, and Maria could see the longing in his eyes whenever he talked about them. The team's medic, Hospital Corpsman First Class Ryan Doc Mitchell, was the quiet one of the group. He rarely spoke during his haircuts, but Maria could sense the weight he carried from all the lives he had tried to save. His hands would sometimes shake slightly when he wasn't actively engaged in medical work, a sign of the stress and trauma that came with his job. The youngest member of the team was Petty Officer 3rd Class, Jason Rookie Thompson, barely 22 years old, but already hardened by multiple deployments. Despite his youth, he had proven himself in combat and earned the respect of his teammates. Maria often worried about him, seeing glimpses of the boy he used to be beneath the warrior he had become. Rounding out the team was Senior Chief Petty Officer Michael Bear Jackson, a massive man with arms like tree trunks and a surprisingly gentle demeanor. Bear had been Hawk's partner for over 8 years, and they worked together with the kind of seamless coordination that only came from complete trust and countless shared dangers. On this particular morning in late September, the atmosphere on the base felt different. Maria noticed it the moment she arrived at her salon. There was a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that made her instincts, honed by years of military service, stand at attention. Soldiers moved with more purpose. Conversations were quieter, and there seemed to be more officers than usual, moving between buildings. As she set up her equipment for the day, Maria observed the increased activity around the base operations center. Vehicles were being prepared, weapons checked, and communication equipment tested. She recognized the signs of a major operation being planned, though she had no idea what the target might be. Around 1,000 hours, Hawk and his team arrived at her salon. They had requested a block of time for all 5 members to get haircuts before what Hawk described as an extended field exercise. Maria could see the seriousness in their faces and knew this was more than just training. As she worked on Hawk's hair, he spoke quietly about the mission. They had been tasked with capturing a high-value target who was believed to be coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. The target was holed up in a compound approximately 20 kilometers northeast of the base, in terrain that was known to be heavily defended by enemy fighters. "It's a tricky one, Maria," Hawk said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Intelligence suggests there are at least 30 fighters in the area, maybe more. We'll be going in fast and light, but extraction could be complicated." Maria continued cutting his hair, her hands steady despite the growing concern in her heart. She had heard enough mission briefings to know that this sounded particularly dangerous, even for a team as skilled as Hawk's SEALs. Tech was next in the chair, and as Maria worked on his fade, he pulled out his phone to show her new pictures of his children. His daughter had just started school, and his son was taking his first steps. The pride and love in his voice made Maria's chest tight with emotion. "Promise me something, Tech," she said softly as she trimmed around his ears. "Promise me. You'll be careful out there." Tech smiled, the same confident grin he always wore before a mission. "Don't worry about us, Maria. We've got each other's backs. We'll be home before you know it." Doc, as usual, remained quiet during his haircut, but Maria could see the tension in his shoulders and the way his jaw was clenched. She had learned to read the signs of pre-mission stress in the troops, and Doc was carrying more than his usual load. Rookie tried to maintain his typical joking demeanor, but Maria could see through the facade. His hands trembled slightly as he showed her a letter from his girlfriend back home. She was talking about marriage when he returned from his deployment, and the weight of that future happiness seemed to press down on him. Bear, despite his imposing size, was perhaps the most nervous of all. He had mentioned to Maria before that this deployment was supposed to be his last. He was planning to retire and open a small business with his brother in Montana. The thought of something going wrong so close to the end of his career was clearly weighing on his mind. As she finished with Bear's haircut, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She had been carrying a secret for months, something she had discovered through careful observation and her trained intelligence-gathering skills. There was someone on the base who was passing information to the enemy. Someone who knew about mission details and troop movements. Maria had first noticed the pattern 3 months earlier, when several patrols had been ambushed in locations where enemy fighters shouldn't have had advance warning. She began paying closer attention to who had access to mission information, and when certain conversations took place in her salon. Through her unique position as someone trusted by the troops but often ignored as a mere civilian contractor, she had been able to piece together a troubling picture. "Hawk," she said quietly as the team prepared to leave. "Can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Hawk nodded and gestured for his men to wait outside. Maria quickly swept the hair clippings from around her chair, a nervous habit she had developed when dealing with stressful situations. "I need to tell you something important," she began, her voice barely audible. "I think there's a leak on the base. Someone has been passing mission information to the enemy." Hawk's expression immediately became deadly serious. "What makes you think that?" Maria quickly explained her observations, the pattern of ambushes, and her suspicions about who might be involved. She mentioned Captain Bradley Pierce, the intelligence officer who had access to mission details and who had been asking unusually specific questions during his visits to her salon. "Pierce has been pumping the troops for information," she continued. "He asks about patrol routes, timing, numbers. Says it's for after-action reports, but the questions are too detailed and too focused." Hawk processed this information quickly. He knew Pierce professionally and had always found something unsettling about the man. Pierce had arrived at FOB Thunder 6 months earlier as a replacement for their previous intelligence officer, who had been killed in an IED explosion. "Maria, this is serious intelligence. I need to report this to command immediately." "There's no time," Maria replied urgently. "Your mission launches in 4 hours. Pierce will know about it, which means the enemy will too. You're walking into a trap." Hawk stared at her for a long moment, weighing his options. He trusted Maria implicitly, but making accusations against a fellow officer without concrete proof could end his career. On the other hand, ignoring a potential threat could get his entire team killed. "What do you suggest?" he asked finally. Maria had been thinking about this moment for weeks, preparing for the possibility that she might need to act on her suspicions. "Let me help. I have experience with this kind of situation. My background isn't what people think." "What do you mean?" Maria took a deep breath and made the decision to reveal her true identity. "I'm not just a hairdresser, Hawk. I served 2 tours in Army intelligence. I worked undercover operations in Iraq, and I know how to handle situations like this." Hawk's eyes widened as he processed this revelation. Suddenly, many things about Maria made sense. Her ability to read people, her uncanny awareness of base activities, and the way she seemed to know things before they became common knowledge. "What's your plan?" he asked. "First, we need to confirm that Pierce is the leak. Then we need to figure out how to use that information to your advantage, instead of letting it get you killed." "The mission is too important to scrub," Hawk said. "Command won't cancel it based on suspicions. Then we don't tell Command. We handle this ourselves." Hawk considered this for a moment. He knew it was against protocol, but he also knew that Maria was right about the timing. If there was a leak and they reported it through proper channels, the investigation could take days or weeks. His team would be deployed on dangerous missions throughout that period, walking into potential ambushes every time they left the wire. "What do you need from me?" he asked finally. "Information," Maria replied. "I need to know the exact details of your mission. Timing, routes, objectives, everything. Then, I need you to trust me to handle Pierce. Maria, if you're wrong about this, you could end up in military prison." "I've been in worse situations," she said with a slight smile. "Besides, I care too much about you guys to let you walk into a trap." Hawk made his decision. He quickly briefed Maria on the mission details: the target location, insertion and extraction points, timeline, and contingency plans. As he spoke, Maria committed every detail to memory, her intelligence training taking over. "Now I need you to do something for me," she said. "I need you to delay your insertion by 2 hours. Tell Command there's a mechanical issue with one of the helicopters or something. Give me time to work. Scream loud. Ask. What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to give Pierce exactly what he wants. Information about your mission. But I'm going to give him the wrong information." Hawk understood immediately. It was a classic counterintelligence operation. Use the enemy's own source against them by feeding false information through the compromised channel. That's incredibly dangerous, Maria. If Pierce suspects what you're doing, he'll have to eliminate you to protect himself. "Let me worry about Pierce," Maria said confidently. "You just focus on getting your team ready for a mission that's going to be very different from what Command thinks it will be." As Hawk rejoined his team outside the salon, Maria began preparing for the most dangerous operation of her life. She was no longer just the base hairdresser. She was once again a trained intelligence operative, and American lives depended on her skills. Number: The intelligence game. Captain Bradley Pierce arrived at Maria's salon exactly when she expected him to. For the past 3 months, she had carefully tracked his patterns and knew that he always came for a haircut on mission days, usually about 3 hours before major operations were scheduled to launch. It was the perfect timing to gather last-minute intelligence and pass it along to his contacts. Pierce was a thin, nervous man in his early 30s with pale skin and constantly darting eyes. He had the kind of face that people forgot easily, which probably made him good at his job as an intelligence officer. What Maria had noticed, however, was that Pierce never seemed nervous before his own missions. Only before missions involving other units, particularly special operations teams like Hawk's SEALs. "Afternoon, Maria," Pierce said as he settled into her chair. "Busy day around here, isn't it?" "Always busy when the teams are heading out," Maria replied casually, beginning to trim his sandy brown hair. Pierce tried to appear nonchalant, but Maria could see the tension in his shoulders. "Oh, just routine patrols as far as I know. Nothing too exciting." Maria had learned over the months that Pierce had a specific technique for gathering information. He would start with casual conversation, then gradually steer toward more specific questions about troop movements, timing, and objectives. She had watched him do it with dozens of soldiers, always presenting himself as someone who needed the information for legitimate military purposes. "Actually," Pierce continued, "I did hear something about a special ops mission today. Have you seen Hawk and his team around?" "And They were here earlier," Maria answered truthfully. "Got their usual pre-mission haircuts. Did they mention anything about their objective?" "I'm supposed to have an intelligence package ready for their return, but the briefing details were a bit vague." This was it. The opening Maria had been waiting for. She began implementing her plan, feeding Pierce false information that would lead his contacts into a trap while protecting Hawk's team. "Well, I probably shouldn't say anything," Maria said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But Hawk did mention they were going after someone important. Something about a compound about 15 kilometers south of here, near that old mining road." Pierce's hands tensed slightly in his lap, the only sign that this information was significant to him. "South of here? That's interesting. Did he mention the timing?" Ah. "They're supposed to insert around 2,200 hours," Maria continued, giving Pierce information that was completely false. The real mission was targeting a location northeast of the base, and Hawk had agreed to delay insertion until midnight. Something about using the cover of that thunderstorm that's supposed to roll in tonight. "Any idea about extraction?" Sounded like they were planning to be back before dawn. Hawk seemed confident it would be quick. "Get in, grab the target, get out." Pierce nodded thoughtfully, and Maria could practically see him, mentally composing the message he would send to his handlers. She continued cutting his hair, maintaining the same casual demeanor she always had, while internally preparing for what she knew would be a very dangerous game of chess. After Pierce left, Maria immediately began the next phase of her operation. She had 2 hours to gather concrete evidence of Pierce's treachery, while setting up the conditions for his capture. It was a complex plan that required perfect timing and a significant amount of risk. First, she needed to confirm that Pierce would communicate the false information to his contacts. Maria had identified Pierce's communication method weeks earlier. He used an old maintenance building on the far side of the base that housed defunct radio equipment. The building was officially off-limits, which made it perfect for clandestine activities. Maria waited 30 minutes after Pierce left her salon, then made her way casually across the base. She had learned from her Army intelligence training how to move without attracting attention, appearing to have legitimate business wherever she went. To anyone watching, she simply looked like a civilian contractor heading to the commissary. The maintenance building was located behind a row of storage containers, hidden from the main traffic areas of the base. Maria approached from the back, where a broken window provided both visual and audio access to the interior. She had used this vantage point twice before to observe Pierce's activities, but had never been able to gather enough evidence to prove what he was doing. As she settled into position behind the building, Maria heard Pierce's voice coming from inside. He was speaking quietly into what sounded like a satellite phone, and she could just make out his words through the broken window. "Target confirmed for tonight," Pierce was saying. "Compound location, 15 kilometers south. Coordinates, 34.258, 1 north, 68.7043 east. Insertion at 2,200 hours. Team strength 5 operators. High-value target extraction mission with pre-dawn return timeline." Maria felt a cold satisfaction as she recorded Pierce's conversation on her phone. He was passing along exactly the false information she had given him, which confirmed both that he was indeed a traitor and that her plan was working. Pierce continued his conversation for several more minutes, providing additional details about base security, patrol schedules, and upcoming operations. Maria recorded everything, building a case that would be ironclad when she eventually turned Pierce over to military authorities. After Pierce finished his communication and left the building, Maria remained in position for another 20 minutes to ensure he was gone. Then she made her way to a secure location where she could contact Hawk without being observed. The communications bunker was staffed by Sergeant First Class Angela Torres, a signals specialist whom Maria had befriended over the past year. Torres was known for her discretion and her loyalty to the special operations teams, making her the perfect person to help facilitate Maria's plan. "Angela, I need to send a secure message to Master Chief Henderson," Maria said as she entered the bunker. "It's urgent, and it needs to be completely off the record." Torres looked at Maria with surprise. As a civilian contractor, Maria shouldn't have knowledge of secure communication protocols or the need to send messages to special operations personnel. However, Torres had always sensed there was more to Maria than met the eye. "This is irregular, Maria. What's this about?" "The one stain. I can't give you all the details right now, but American lives are at stake. I need you to trust me." Torres studied Maria's face for a long moment, then nodded. "What do you need?" Maria quickly composed a message for Hawk, using code words they had agreed upon earlier. The message confirmed that Pierce had taken the bait and provided the false information to his contacts. More importantly, it gave Hawk the location where enemy fighters would be waiting in ambush, allowing him to plan a counter-ambush operation. With the message sent, Maria returned to her salon to wait for the next phase of her plan. She knew that Pierce would likely make additional communications as the mission time approached, and she needed to monitor his activities to ensure that her deception remained effective. As evening approached, the activity level on the base increased significantly. Helicopters were being prepared, weapons loaded, and final briefings conducted. To any outside observer, it appeared that a major operation was about to commence exactly as planned. What they couldn't see was the careful coordination happening between Maria and Hawk's team. Instead of the 5-man SEAL team that Pierce's intelligence had reported, Hawk was actually leading a joint operation involving 15 special operations personnel from multiple units. They would be inserting at the location where Pierce had directed the enemy fighters, but they would be going as hunters rather than hunted. At 1,900 hours, Maria observed Pierce making another trip to the maintenance building. This time, she was prepared with better recording equipment and a more secure observation position. She had also enlisted the help of Torres, who was monitoring communication frequencies to detect any enemy radio traffic that might result from Pierce's intelligence sharing. Pierce's second conversation was longer and more detailed. He was obviously receiving questions from his handlers and providing additional information about the base's defensive capabilities, helicopter flight patterns, and extraction procedures. Maria recorded everything, building an even stronger case against the traitor. More importantly, she learned that the enemy was planning a sophisticated ambush involving more than 50 fighters, positioned at multiple locations around the false target coordinates. They had anti-aircraft weapons positioned to target the helicopters, and had planned to capture any survivors for propaganda purposes. As Pierce finished his communication, Maria realized that her plan had been even more successful than she had hoped. Not only had she protected Hawk's team from walking into a trap, but she had also lured a significant enemy force into a position where they could be eliminated by superior coalition forces. At 2,100 hours, 1 hour before the original mission launch time, Maria received a coded message from Hawk through Torres. The counter-ambush operation was ready to commence. Hawk's expanded team was in position to attack the enemy forces, who were still waiting in ambush positions for a SEAL team that would never come. But Maria's work was far from over. She still had to deal with Pierce himself, and that would require the most dangerous part of her operation. Pierce would expect to receive confirmation that his intelligence had resulted in the successful ambush of the SEAL team. When that confirmation didn't come, he would become suspicious and potentially dangerous. Maria needed to neutralize him before he could realize that his cover had been blown. At 2,130 hours, Maria made her way to Pierce's quarters in the officers' housing area. She carried with her a folder containing false after-action reports that she had created, documents that would support the story she was about to tell. Pierce answered her knock immediately, obviously anxious for news about the mission he had helped to compromise. "Maria? What are you doing here?" "Captain Pierce, I need to speak with you urgently. It's about the SEAL mission tonight." Pierce's face went pale, and Maria could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted desperately to know what had happened, but he couldn't appear too interested without raising suspicions. "What about it?" he asked, stepping aside to let her into his quarters. "There's been a problem," Maria said, closing the door behind her. "The mission was compromised. Someone leaked the information to the enemy." Pierce's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of surprise or concern, his first response was fear. His hands began to shake, and sweat appeared on his forehead despite the cool evening air. "What happened to the team?" he asked, his voice tight with anxiety. "They walked into an ambush," Maria replied, watching Pierce's face carefully. "All 5 men are missing, and presumed captured or killed." Pierce's relief was visible for just a moment before he caught himself and tried to appear concerned. That moment of relief was all Maria needed to confirm her suspicions completely. "That's terrible news," Pierce said, attempting to sound appropriately shocked. "Do we know how the information was leaked?" "That's what I'm here to find out," Maria replied, her voice taking on a harder edge. "The base commander has ordered an immediate investigation into anyone who had access to mission details." Pierce's nervousness increased visibly. "Of course, I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. Though I can't imagine how someone could have gotten access to classified mission information. Oh. Maria pulled out her phone and played back a portion of Pierce's recorded conversation from earlier that day. Pierce's own voice filled the small room. "Target confirmed for tonight. Compound location: 15 kilometers south. Coordinates 34.25, 81 north, 68.7, 04, 3 east." Pierce's face went completely white as he realized he had been caught. His hand moved instinctively toward the service weapon on his belt, but Maria was ready for this reaction. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Captain," she said calmly, revealing her own concealed pistol. "Military police are already surrounding this building." This was a bluff. Maria was operating entirely on her own, but Pierce's guilty conscience made him believe it was true. "You don't understand," Pierce said desperately. "They have my family. They kidnapped my wife and daughter 6 months ago. I never wanted to do this, but they said they would kill them if I didn't cooperate." Maria felt a moment of sympathy for Pierce, understanding that he might be as much a victim as a perpetrator. But she also knew that his actions had put countless American lives at risk, regardless of his motivations. "Where are your wife and daughter being held?" she asked. "I don't know," Pierce replied, collapsing into a chair. "They only contact me when they need information. I've never seen them since they were taken." Maria realized that Pierce's situation was more complex than she had initially understood. If his family was truly being held hostage, then simply arresting him might result in their deaths. She needed to find a way to neutralize Pierce as a security threat, while also potentially saving his family. "Here's what we're going to do," Maria said after thinking for a moment. "You're going to send one final message to your handlers. You're going to tell them that the ambush was successful and that all 5 SEALs were captured alive. Then you're going to help me track down your family." Pierce looked at her with confusion. "I don't understand. Why would you help me?" "Because despite what you've done, you're still an American soldier," Maria replied. "And because the real SEAL team is about to eliminate the enemy force that's been controlling you. Once they're gone, we'll have a better chance of finding your family." What Pierce didn't know was that Maria's false intelligence had led the enemy into a trap that was far more extensive than he could imagine. Hawk's team, reinforced with additional special operations personnel, and supported by attack helicopters and drone surveillance, was about to launch a devastating assault on the enemy force that had been manipulating Pierce. The next few hours would determine whether Maria's complex operation would save not only Hawk's team but also Pierce's family, while eliminating a significant enemy intelligence network that had been operating in the region for months. The final cut. At exactly 2,200 hours, while Pierce sent his final deceptive message to his handlers confirming the false success of their ambush, Hawk's expanded team was moving into position around the enemy force that had been waiting for a SEAL team that would never arrive. The enemy fighters, confident in their intelligence, and positioned for what they believed would be an easy ambush, had no idea they were about to become the hunted instead of the hunters. Maria monitored the operation from the base communications center, where Sergeant Torres had given her access to the encrypted channels being used by the special operations teams. Through her earpiece, she could hear the calm, professional voices of the operators as they coordinated their attack. "Overwatch 1. This is Hawk. I count 37 enemy personnel in defensive positions around grid 34.25. 8-1. They appear to be waiting for our arrival at the original insertion point. Copy, Hawk. Predator drone confirms count. Additional 12 personnel in reserve positions. Approximately 500 meters northeast of primary ambush site." Maria felt a grim satisfaction as she listened to the radio traffic. Her deception had worked perfectly. The enemy had committed significant resources to an ambush that would never happen, and they had positioned themselves exactly where Hawk's team could eliminate them most effectively. Pierce sat beside her in the communications bunker, his face pale and drawn as he realized the magnitude of what was happening. "They're going to kill all of my contacts," he whispered. "How will I ever find my family now?" "That's why you're going to help us capture at least one of them alive," Maria replied. "But first, we need to let this operation play out." The assault began at 2,215 hours with devastating precision. Hawk's team, supported by 2 additional SEAL squads and a Special Forces team, attacked the enemy positions from multiple directions simultaneously. Attack helicopters provided close air support, while drone operators guided precision strikes against enemy weapons positions. The enemy fighters, caught completely off guard by an attack coming from the wrong direction and involving far more personnel than they had expected, were overwhelmed within minutes. Those who tried to flee found their escape routes blocked by additional coalition forces that had been positioned based on intelligence gathered from Pierce's communications. "Contact, contact," came Hawk's voice over the radio. "Multiple. Enemy Kia. We have 3 wounded enemy personnel secured for interrogation." Maria exchanged glances with Pierce. This was exactly what they needed. Prisoners who might have information about Pierce's family and the broader enemy intelligence network. The operation continued for another 30 minutes, as coalition forces systematically eliminated or captured the entire enemy force. When the shooting finally stopped, 41 enemy fighters were dead, and 8 were captured alive. More importantly for Pierce's situation, among the captured were 2 men who appeared to be senior leaders in the local insurgent network. As the special operations teams began the process of securing the battlefield and preparing prisoners for transport, Maria initiated the next phase of her plan. She needed to question the captured enemy personnel while their wounds were fresh and before they had time to prepare their stories. "Pierce, you're coming with me to the detention facility," Maria said. "You're going to help identify these prisoners and translate during the interrogations." "I can't do that," Pierce protested. "If they see me cooperating with you, they'll know I've been compromised. They'll kill my family for sure." "Your family is already dead if we don't find them tonight," Maria replied bluntly. "These prisoners are our only lead. And you're the only one who knows how to communicate with this network." Pierce understood the truth of her statement. His handlers would expect regular communication from him, and when those communications stopped, they would assume he had been captured or killed. Either way, his usefulness to them would be over, and his family would likely be eliminated as a security precaution. At 0100 hours, Maria and Pierce arrived at the temporary detention facility that had been set up to process the captured enemy fighters. The wounded prisoners had been given medical treatment and were now ready for questioning. Maria had arranged for the interrogation to be conducted by herself and Pierce, with backup from military intelligence personnel who would remain out of sight but ready to intervene if necessary. The senior-most prisoner was a man in his 40s with graying hair and intelligent eyes. He had been shot in the shoulder, but was alert and defiant despite his wounds. When Pierce entered the interrogation room, the man's eyes widened with recognition. "Captain Pierce," the man said in accented English. "I did not expect to see you here." Hello, Ahmed," Pierce replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "It's over. They know everything." Ahmed's expression shifted from surprise to calculation as he processed this information. "If that is true, then you know what will happen to your family." "That's what we need to talk about," Maria interjected, taking control of the conversation. "Where are Captain Pierce's wife and daughter being held?" Ahmed looked at Maria with obvious contempt. "You are the woman who gives the soldiers haircuts. Why would I discuss such matters with you?" Because I'm the woman who just destroyed your entire operation," Maria replied calmly. "Your ambush failed. Your fighters are dead, and your network is compromised. The only question now is whether you want to cooperate and live, or stay silent and die." Ahmed laughed bitterly. "You think this was my only operation? You think eliminating one cell makes any difference? There are dozens more, and they all know about Captain Pierce's family." Pierce leaned forward desperately. "Please, Ahmed, my wife and daughter have nothing to do with this. Let them go, and I'll tell you anything you want to know about base security." "It is too late for bargaining," Ahmed replied. "Your usefulness ended the moment you walked into this room. Your family's fate was sealed when you chose to cooperate with these people." Maria had expected this response, but she had prepared for it. From her folder, she pulled out a photograph that made Ahmed's confident expression falter immediately. "Recognize her?" Maria asked, showing Ahmed the photo. The picture showed a young woman in her 20s with Ahmed's same distinctive facial features. It was his daughter, Fatima, who was currently a graduate student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. "Where did you get that?" Ahmed demanded, his composure cracking for the first time. "I told you. I'm more than just a hairdresser," Maria replied. "I know about your daughter's student visa, her apartment in Arlington, her boyfriend who works for the State Department, and her plans to apply for permanent residency in the United States." Ahmed's face had gone pale as he realized the implications of what Maria was saying. "Here's what's going to happen," Maria continued. "You're going to tell me exactly where Captain Pierce's family is being held. Then you're going to contact your network and tell them that Pierce died in tonight's operation along with his family. In return, your daughter gets to continue her life in America without any interference from U.S. authorities. And if you refuse, I make one phone call, and your daughter disappears into the U.S. detention system as a suspected terrorist associate. Her student visa gets revoked. Her boyfriend loses his security clearance. And she spends the next 10 years fighting deportation proceedings while sitting in a federal prison. Ahmed stared at Maria for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. Pierce's family is being held in a compound 15 kilometers north of Kabul. It is managed by a man named Rashid Malik, who coordinates hostage operations for several insurgent groups. Pierce let out a sob of relief at finally learning where his family was located. Are they alive? Have they been hurt? They were alive as of 3 days ago, Ahmed replied. Malik keeps his hostages in good condition as long as they remain useful. But if he learns that you have been compromised, he will eliminate them immediately. Maria was already making mental calculations about rescue options. 15 kilometers north of Kabul was within range of special operations forces, but it would require careful coordination with Afghan government forces and possibly international authorities. I need more details, Maria said. How many guards? What kind of security? How are the hostages being held? Ahmed provided a detailed description of the compound layout, guard rotations, and security measures. As he spoke, Maria recorded everything, building the intelligence package that would be needed for a rescue operation. There is something else you should know, Ahmed added. Malik's compound is not just holding Pierce's family. There are at least 6 other hostages there, including 2 European aid workers and a Japanese journalist who disappeared 3 months ago. This information changed the entire scope of the situation. What had started as Maria's effort to protect a 5-man SEAL team had evolved into a major counterintelligence operation that could potentially save multiple innocent lives. At 0300 hours, Maria contacted Base Command with a complete briefing on the night's events. She provided evidence of Pierce's espionage activities, the successful elimination of the enemy intelligence network, and the intelligence regarding the hostage compound near Kabul. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, was initially skeptical of Maria's story. The idea that his base hairdresser was actually a trained intelligence operative seemed impossible to believe. However, the evidence she presented was overwhelming, and the success of the night's operations spoke for itself. Maria, what you've done here is extraordinary, Morrison said after reviewing all the materials. But I have to ask, who the hell are you? Really? Maria smiled slightly. I'm exactly who I've always been, sir. Just a hairdresser who happens to care about the troops. Within 6 hours, a joint special operations task force was assembled to assault the compound where Pierce's family and the other hostages were being held. The operation, codenamed Final Cut, would involve American Special Forces working with Afghan government troops and would be coordinated by Maria herself, who had been given temporary reinstatement to her former military rank for the duration of the mission. Pierce, meanwhile, faced a complex legal situation. While he had undoubtedly committed acts of espionage and treason, his cooperation in locating the hostages and his coerced participation due to family threats would be significant mitigating factors in any court-martial proceedings. At 1,200 hours the following day, the rescue operation commenced. Using intelligence provided by Ahmed and corroborated by drone surveillance, the task force surrounded the compound and launched a precise assault designed to minimize risk to the hostages. The operation was a complete success. All 8 hostages, including Pierce's wife and daughter, were rescued without serious injury. Malik and his guards were either killed or captured, and a significant cache of intelligence materials was recovered that would lead to additional operations against insurgent networks throughout the region. Pierce was reunited with his family under armed guard at a secure medical facility in Germany, where they would remain while his legal situation was resolved. His wife and daughter, who had endured 6 months of captivity, were physically unharmed, but would require extensive counseling to deal with the psychological trauma of their ordeal. For Maria, the successful conclusion of the operation marked the end of her cover as a simple base hairdresser. She was offered positions with various intelligence agencies and special operations units, but she chose instead to continue her work in a different capacity. 3 months later, Maria opened a new salon at a different forward operating base. this time with her military credentials openly acknowledged. She continued to provide haircuts and comfort to deployed troops, but now also served as an unofficial counselor and intelligence analyst for special operations personnel. Hawk and his team returned to their base in Virginia, where they were awarded decorations for their role in the operation. More importantly to Maria, all 5 men returned home safely to their families. Tech was able to watch his son take his first steps via video call. Doc found some measure of peace in knowing he had helped save innocent lives. Rookie proposed to his girlfriend during his first leave, and Bear was able to retire as planned and open his business in Montana. The operation had lasting impacts beyond just the immediate rescue of the hostages. The intelligence gathered from Ahmed and the materials recovered from Malik's compound led to the disruption of a network that had been responsible for numerous attacks against coalition forces and the kidnapping of dozens of civilians. Ahmed, true to Maria's promise, saw his daughter continue her studies in the United States without interference. However, he remained in military custody, where his detailed knowledge of insurgent networks continued to provide valuable intelligence for ongoing operations. As for Pierce, his case was eventually resolved through a plea agreement that took into account his coerced participation and his cooperation in rescuing the hostages. He was sentenced to military prison, but would be eligible for parole after serving 3 years. His wife and daughter settled in a small town in Oregon, where they slowly rebuilt their lives under new identities provided by the Witness Protection Program. Maria's story became legend among the special operations community, though the classified nature of many details meant that the full scope of her actions would never be publicly known. She had proven that heroism could come from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with intelligence, courage, and compassion. Years later, when Maria would tell this story to new troops getting their haircuts, she would always emphasize the same lesson. In war, everyone has a role to play in protecting their fellow service members. Sometimes that role is obvious: carrying a weapon and facing the enemy directly. Sometimes it's less obvious: providing intelligence, support, or simply being observant enough to notice when something isn't right. The enemy had thought they were clever, using threats against an innocent family to turn an American officer into their spy. They had underestimated the bonds that form between service members and those who support them. They had failed to understand that in the American military, everyone, from the highest-ranking general to the civilian contractor cutting hair, is part of a family that protects its own. Maria's scissors had given thousands of soldiers a small piece of comfort and normalcy in a harsh and dangerous world. But when the time came, those same skilled hands had wielded something far more powerful than scissors. They had wielded the truth, and the courage to act on it. The base hairdresser had become the hero she had always been, hidden in plain sight, ready to serve when her country and her fellow service members needed her most. In the end, it wasn't about what her job title said she was supposed to do. It was about what needed to be done, and having the skill and courage to do it. The enemy had closed in on the captured SEALs, but they had found something they never expected: a guardian angel with a pair of scissors and the heart of a warrior.